Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Samantha Farley, and today I'm going to be doing Diabetes 101 for you because when I first was diagnosed, I went into DKA, and when I went to the hospital, all of the doctors and nurses were talking in a different language to me. Not literally, but they were talking about diabetes, and I had no idea what diabetes even really meant at that time. So I wanted to do a quick video just giving you the basics of diabetes, what it is, what's the difference between type 1, type 2, how someone gets diabetes, what you do once you find out you get diabetes, and all of that jazz. So if you want to learn a little bit more, stay tuned and watch some of this video, and go grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's get started. So one important thing to note is I am not a doctor. I was diagnosed with diabetes almost 1 year ago, and I did not know what diabetes was 1 year ago today. And so it's very important for me to note that I am not a doctor, did not go to medical school, and I am not able to give medical advice, and I am not a nutritionist. So take all of this information with a grain of salt, but this is what I have learned over the past year of being diagnosed with diabetes. Okay, so what even is diabetes? We hear that word a lot thrown around in the world, and usually when people say diabetes, they mean type 2 diabetes. A lot of the ads we see on TV, a lot of the word of mouth, things we hear from people to people is around type 2 diabetes. There's not much information out there in the world in terms of ads and just information regarding type 1 diabetes, but they are two very different distinctions when it comes to the medical term and the medical aspect of diabetes. So what even is diabetes in general? What does that mean? So diabetes is a group of diseases that result in too much sugar in the blood. So even that right there might seem like a lot of information. If you weren't, a nurse in school, or if you weren't in anything medical related, that might be confusing. I was a business major. I did not take one class in college related to medicine at all, or health. So that, to me, when I first heard it, was even confusing. What do you mean there's too much sugar in the blood? What does that even mean? And a lot of times when people hear sugar, they think sugar, right? Like table sugar, sugar that's in cookies. And so this is where the misconception comes in between type 1 and type 2, and why a lot of people believe that you get diabetes from eating too much sugar. Because we hear the term diabetes is because you get too much sugar in the blood. But that's not really what it means in medical terms. So too much blood in the sugar is high glucose. And when you have diabetes, you most likely have some sort of high glucose. And when I went into DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis, I still can't say that. Basically, my blood sugars were very, very high for over a consistent amount of time. So they were guessing that I was high for about 3 months. And by high, I had high blood sugar, and my number when I went into the hospital was 420. And that's actually low for a lot of people that I've heard that had go into DKA. A lot of people are in 600s, 700s, 800s, even 1000s. And so the fact that I was only in 420 is not that bad. The fact that I had 420 for probably over a 3-month period, now that's bad. But not to keep jumping into getting further along, because this is Diabetes 101. Basically, the simple term of diabetes is just too much sugar in the blood. So now there are actually several different types of diabetes, but the top two that we hear about the most are type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. The third one that we hear about a lot is also gestational diabetes. I'm going to break down these three in more specifics, but I want you to know that there's actually more than just 3 types of diabetes. There's actually a lot more, maybe 10. And the reason we don't hear about a lot of the other ones is just because they're more rare than type 1, type 2, or gestational. But I highly recommend you look those up as well, because they all are still very valid types of diabetes, and they should be built on awareness as well. So let's break down each type of diabetes. So let's start with type 1. I am a type 1 diabetic. What does that mean? Type 1 diabetes is a chronic condition in which the pancreas produces little to no insulin. How does this happen? It's kind of a scary thought because insulin is what we need to break down the glucose or sugar in our body. And if our pancreas is not making any insulin or very little of it, that means the sugar in our blood will not be broken down, which results in a high blood sugar. I will go into this a little bit more about how type 1 diabetics become type 1 diabetics, but that is the definition of a type 1 diabetic. We produce little to no insulin. And then there is type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is also a chronic condition that affects the way the body processes the blood sugar. Basically, a type 2 is that your body cannot use the insulin properly that it is producing. So the difference between type 1 and type 2 is type 1s don't really make any insulin, if any at all. Type 2 actually makes insulin, but it's not using it properly within the body. A lot of people get confused by this, and it's understandable because they are very similar, but they're also very different. And because we hear type 2 a lot more, it's hard to make the distinction of what's the difference between type 1 and type 2. Well, a little analogy that I heard once that really helped me understand it more was about a door. So let's picture a door that's locked and you need a key to get in. Well, type 1 diabetes is not having a key at all. So no matter what, you are not going to be able to open that door because you don't have a key. Type 2 diabetes is you have a key, but it's the wrong key. You may have 10 keys, but it's still the wrong key. So you still can't get in, right? So those are the two separations of type 1 and type 2. One does not have a key at all, and that's me. I don't have a key. In type 2, is you got lots of keys, but you don't have the right key to actually produce the right insulin. So that is the analogy between type 1 and type 2. Moving into gestational diabetes. Gestational is a form of high blood sugar that pregnant women get while they're pregnant. Now, this only happens when you're pregnant. So you'll get it when you're pregnant, and then usually after you have the baby, it will go away. The high blood sugar will go away and you'll go back to normal. Sometimes that gestational diabetes will turn into type 2 diabetes, but that's all dependent on the person and the type of diabetes you have and how it goes through pregnancy and all of that. I am not a gestational diabetes expert. I don't know much about it, honestly. I do follow a ton of people on Instagram that do gestational diabetes help. So if you want help, I can, tag them below so you can click on them. If you know of any good experts in gestational or type 1 or type 2, please put them in the comments because I would love to learn from them as well. But then also all the other people watching can learn from them too. So how does someone get type 1 diabetes? How does someone get type 2 diabetes? How does someone get gestational diabetes? Well, gestational is easier to understand. Like I mentioned earlier, so only women can get gestational diabetes and it will only happen when you're pregnant. Where that comes into play as which pregnant woman does and which one doesn't, that I do not know. If you know, comment below because I would like to know. But how does somebody get type 1 and how does somebody get type 2? So there's a lot of misconception around this too. I've heard it myself. I've heard it all over the internet. A lot of people believe that type 1 diabetes comes from eating too much sugar or just eating a bunch of fat and eating a bunch of crap. Well, that's actually not the case. Type 1 diabetes, unfortunately, comes from a virus. And it comes from a virus that basically attacks your autoimmune system and attacks your pancreas. My doctors believe that the virus that I had was COVID, and they believe that COVID attacked my pancreas because 3 months after I had COVID is when I went into DKA. And when they did my A1C for over the 3-month period, it was 14.6, 14.1, 14.6. And so they believe it came from COVID. However, I have a different story about this. I think I maybe have been kind of on the edge for several years. And that's a different story I'll go into, not on this video, but type 1 diabetes comes from a virus. It comes from a virus attacking your body, attacking your pancreas, so it stops producing the insulin that it automatically normally should be producing. And it's very unfortunate because to this day, there is no known prevention or protectiveness that we can do to keep that from happening. I guess the only thing would be to not get a virus, but that's life. We all get it, and it can come from any virus. I have a few friends here in Denver that have type 1 diabetes, and they've all gotten it from different viruses. I know a couple people who've gotten it from the flu. I know a couple people who have gotten it from mono. It's unfortunate because those are just things you get when you go through life, and it's really the severity of the virus to when it's going to attack your pancreas. Everyone that has type 1 did not do it to themselves. They did not eat bad foods. They did not eat too much sugar. There's nothing they could have done to prevent this. It just comes and it happens, and it's a very unfortunate way to get a terrible disease. Moving into type 2. So this is a little different, and this is once again the one we hear about all the time. Type 2 is a little bit different. Type 2 does result from not necessarily eating very healthy, not exercising, not taking care of yourself over time. So one bad day of eating unhealthy isn't going to bring you type 2 diabetes. It's over time. So 10, 20, 30 years of eating unhealthy, not working out can bring you type 2 diabetes. And it's the same way. Just the act of not taking care of yourself makes your pancreas stop producing insulin in the way it should be working. But remember, type 2 does produce insulin, just not in the right way. Some statistics for type 1 versus type 2. Because type 2 is heard about more often, it's because 1 in 10 people have type 2 diabetes. So it is more common. I mean, if you're in a room of 10 people, most likely one of those people, if not more, have type 2 diabetes. However, type 1 is less common. It's more rare. The numbers are about 1 in 100. So if you're in a room of 100 people, probably only one of those people will have type 1 diabetes. Unfortunately, I actually just read an article the other day that type 1 diabetes is going to continue becoming more prevalent and more people are going to be getting it, which is heartbreaking because it's not a fun disease whatsoever. But it is going to become more prevalent, and it's important to build awareness around it, and especially awareness around the symptoms you get prior to being diagnosed. So I just gave a lot of information on Diabetes 101. Now, if you've had diabetes, you probably know all of this information. I mean, I didn't know any of this information a year ago, but I've had diabetes for almost a year, and now I know it pretty well. And so you learn it quick because you have to, right? Once you're diagnosed with the disease, you learn this information very, very quickly. Unfortunately, most diabetics know what all of this means, but if you don't have anyone in your family with diabetes, or you don't know anybody that has diabetes, you most likely don't know any of this information. And that's not to be blamed, and that's not to, feel bad about, or I don't hate you because you don't know anything about diabetes, but I am here to build more awareness around it because people should know about it, right? It's not your fault you don't know about it. The world is not teaching you about it, but that's why I'm here. I want to share my knowledge with all of you. I want to share my knowledge with the new diabetics who don't know this information yet. Don't worry, you will. If you're watching, you will understand all of this, I promise. And really just build awareness. It's an unfortunate disease. I always say diabetes sucks, so don't do it alone, right? And so I want to share as much information as I can from what I'm learning as I go through life with this. I'm only a year in. I know very little compared to people who have had it for 20 years. And I want to be able to share my knowledge as I learn it with you so I can help everyone in this world. I want to help the people that have diabetes. I want to help the caregivers of people with diabetes. I want to help the family members who aren't necessarily caregivers, but they have to live with, a family member that has diabetes. I want to help those people. I want to help the friends of people with diabetes. I want to help people who don't know anybody with diabetes, right? Because they need to know, they need to watch out for it just in case something happens to somebody. So I just gave a lot of information about the basics of type 1 diabetes. I will do another one of these sessions, maybe Diabetes 102, and break everything down even more. But I wanted to at least give this basis so the new people can learn a little bit more about it. If you have questions, comment below. I would try to answer them as best as I can. If you have anything to add, if you're a diabetic of 5, 10, 15 years and you have things to add, to share with people, please comment it below. We're all here together. We're all here to help each other. I appreciate you all watching this video. I hope I didn't screw anything up. Remember, I don't have a medical degree, so I try to describe everything the way I learned it and the best to my knowledge. I'd love to join you in this journey. So if you want, make sure to subscribe to these videos because I post them once a week. And then make sure to subscribe to my email list, which the link is below. Follow me on Instagram. I love meeting new people, so follow me, message me, say hey, say what's up. I'll see you guys next week in the next video. See ya.